Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Another look at the PBC's plan to stage pay-per-views in both December and January, and possibly beyond that. The recently announced Spence versus Fundora fight, that's going to be a pay-per-view too. You know it is. It's the way the story is being reported for me. Mike Kopinger said 2 really strong pay-per-view undercard fights. Back-to-back weeks in December between Fulton Figueroa 2 and Bohachuk versus Madrimov. Now, Bohachuk versus Madrimov, there's actual intrigue in association with that fight. I love that fight. That's scheduled to go down on the undercard of Fury versus Usyk, but Fulton versus Figueroa 2, let me tell you something. That was a fight that you got as part of your regular subscription to Showtime. That was not a pay-per-view. You didn't have to pay per view to see it. Now you do.
How is that value for money? You're charging me for something that you weren't charging me to see before.
So when I uploaded my last video and I talked about the potentiality of this fight, just as I was uploading it, the news broke that these two would be fighting again. Up until that point, it was just something that I heard, a rumor. Now it seems to be official, more or less.
Talks are serious. It's going down before this year is out. This will be Stephen Fulton's second fight of this year.
And Mike is talking about it like this is some highly anticipated rematch, like this is a highly anticipated fight, when it isn't. Stephen didn't even look good in his last fight.
No.
Now, instead of Stephen shooting for his title shot at Nick Ball because he's Nick Ball's mandatory challenger, he's fighting Brandon again. We already know what the logic is. Why go to Liverpool and potentially lose in somebody else's backyard when you can stay on your own side of the street? The difference is, if you fight Nick Ball, it's for a full world title. If you fight Brandon again, it's just for an interim title. It's just for an interim belt, which allows the PBC to keep everything in-house. That whoever wins that fight, they'll likely move on to fight Ray Vargas. I'm not sure if Ray is still affiliated with them, but he might be.
Maybe.
Don't even know anymore because by all rights, it should be Brandon Figueroa versus Ray Vargas. Brandon is interim champion. He's already Ray's mandatory challenger.
Why isn't that fight happening?
Why are you repackaging and repurposing this rematch that no one was asking for instead of Brandon fighting for the WBC title, the way the PBC do things? It's just ass backwards in every way that you can imagine. When a Rolly Romero turns down a Ryan Garcia main event to fight Isaac Cruz in an undercard.
Loses.
When a Brandon Figueroa waits in limbo for his title shot, he ends up running it back with a Stephen Fulton instead. And everything they seem to have planned, everything they seem to have on the schedule, save the Zoo versus Murtazaliev fight, is in fact a pay-per-view. Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach, David Benavidez versus David Morrell, Spence versus Fundora. These are all pay-per-views accenting the same thing I told you months ago.
Either Amazon isn't giving them a budget at all, so they have to resort to billing most of everything as a pay-per-view, or they're giving them something, but it's not enough to do a regular schedule of fights.
Like what they used to do on Fox. Like what they used to do on Showtime. Now they're almost exclusively doing pay-per-views.
Exclusively.
At this point, they're doing it out of necessity. It's out of need now, but these practices didn't all of a sudden start when they jumped into bed with Amazon. This has been going on for years, the abuse of the pay-per-view model, a contributing factor in the decline of pay-per-view sales in America and boxing as a whole. When you put that many fights behind a paywall, you limit the size of the audience.
Pay-per-views really aren't for the platform. The main ones who benefit from a pay-per-view are actually the boxing people, the fighters, their managers,
because it's a chance for them to make a little bit more money than they would on a regular show. A regular fight, it's part of a regular schedule. They get the chance to make a little bit more dough on the premise that if the pay-per-view does well, they'll get some money on the back end or the upside.
After the pay-per-view breaks even, if the pay-per-view breaks even, theoretically.
It's theoretical because if the numbers aren't robust, if the numbers ain't that great, the pay-per-view might not even break even, and it might be a flop, it might be a loss, or maybe it does break even.
But there's no upside, no extra.
You will have limited the size of the audience that could view the fight needlessly, because you put it behind a paywall thinking you'd find riches. All you got were mediocre numbers. And the journos in the sport don't highlight this enough, don't talk about this enough, that it's these practices that have led to the decline in pay-per-view sales and the market for boxing in America as a whole. When so many fights end up behind a paywall, the fighters end up getting less and less exposure.
Less people know them, less people talk about them, and before you know it, you're charging $75 to $80 for a fight that nobody was asking for.
Playing hard to get when you're hard to want. That's the gist of it.
It's not pay-per-view worthy just because you say so, and it's not pay-per-view worthy based on some fighter and his manager's inflated financial demands. The market dictates the value of a show.
And if the market didn't ask you for this fight, these fights, why are you charging $80 to $90 to see them? It seems that the PBC is still limping along. I'm surprised they're even still in business.
I didn't know if they would survive until the end of the year, but they do seem to have 2 pay-per-views planned for the coming year.
This is what we saw them do on Fox. This is what we saw them do on Showtime. Though at least then, they had the opportunity to bill fights as regular fights as part of a regular schedule. They don't have that luxury anymore because they're not getting an annual budget to do so. What they're doing now is tantamount to crowd-funded boxing, which isn't the industry standard. Everybody else still has a regular schedule of fights that doesn't cost the consumer an arm and a leg to watch, save the PBC. I feel that the journos in boxing don't do enough to chastise them, to put them in that negative light. How could you charge people this much, this often, in this economy?
The other guys ain't doing that.
You add a fight that we already saw, at no additional charge, by the way, to the undercard, and pretend that's value for money when all they're doing is charging you now to see something they weren't charging you to see before.
You playing dumb or are you dumb?
Here's a wake-up call. A lot of these enthusiastic people you see online talking about these fights, they ain't even gonna buy them.
The ones who swear by Al Heyman's PBC and love all things PBC fighters, talk about them till the cows come home. They're not gonna buy these fights. They're gonna steal them. You've created an environment for them to where the only fighters they're really interested in, the only way they can watch them is to either fork over $80 or steal the fight altogether. And they're not even hiding it anymore.
Supporters, quote-unquote supporters like that, who needs enemies?
Right.
The bottom line is, the situation hasn't gotten any better. In fact, I think it's gotten worse. Many in the American media are pulling their punches on Al Heyman and his PBC and their haphazard business practices because for whatever reason, they don't want to put him in a negative light. Now, in my previous video, I talked about Terence Crawford standing down and stepping aside to allow Sebastian Fundora to fight the guy that he beat the hell out of last year, and I noticed 1 or 2 dumb dullards
Idiots.
who are essentially blaming Terence Crawford for a fight Sebastian Fundora is choosing to have. You're choosing to defend your titles against Errol Spence because we know he's not your mandatory. Terence is your mandatory. If you guys came to an agreement, it's because you wanted one.
You needed one to keep your titles.
Samson Lukowicz made his feelings crystal clear weeks ago, months ago, but you don't want to hold them accountable because you've got some kind of axe to grind with Terence Crawford. So when Samson Lukowicz said immediately after the Fundora versus Zoo fight that Terence Crawford would have to wait because who they want to fight is Errol Spence Jr. And when I screenshotted that story,
If you don't want to take it from me, if you don't believe me that he said that.
I've shown you where you can read the story in full detail. Not that the story was going under the radar because it wasn't. It was widely publicized. You're just pretending that you didn't see it or not acknowledging it so you can keep playing this stupid game. See, this segment is not about the Crawford, Fundora, Spence thing. It's about the idiots in the American boxing scene and how they think that because they're on social media, they're free to socialize with people that would otherwise ignore them.
You know, because they only say stupid stuff.
The guy told me Bud never had any intention of fighting the Towering Inferno. Team Bud pressed for the fight, hoping Fundora would drop the belt. Team Bud pulled the plug on the Fundora fight. Not Team Fundora or Samson.
Samson Lukowicz, who told the world Crawford has to wait because we want to fight Spence. That's Samson?
You say that Team Crawford was pressing the issue, hoping that Sebastian would drop the belt. You understand that he could have kept pressing the issue to get Sebastian to drop the belt, and Sebastian wouldn't have had a choice.
There wouldn't have been nothing he could do about it. If it was just about getting a vacant title, he could have done that.
If they reached an agreement, that allows Sebastian to keep the title while fighting Errol Spence Jr., it's because Sebastian wanted one, not because Terrence wanted one.
Terrence doesn't need it.
An agreement? What the hell does he need with an agreement that allows Sebastian to fight Errol? Nothing.
Stupid.
I sometimes wonder if these individuals that I come across in this digital environment are really that stupid, and they're not. They're just being willfully obtuse because they have an axe to grind and they can't get ahead of their feelings. They can't keep their feelings out of it to be objective, which is fine. Fine for them, but don't pester me with that crap. Boxing is not a sport to the Americans because the Americans are too stupid to look at it as a sport. No, boxing is a vehicle for their bigotry, their racism, their feelings,
Their agendas.
Don't you notice that the most arbitrary and stupid topics become hot topics in the American boxing scene, no matter how idiotic they are? In fact, the more idiotic they are, the more attention they get.
From these idiots.
So we're at a point to where these guys think they can talk because they got a mouth. They think that because they want to argue, they actually have an argument.
You don't.
What it is the facts don't stack up the way you want them to, and you can't get over it, so all you've got to offer in terms of an argument are your feelings, your little feelings.
Why don't you go feel a rock with your foot after you kick it?
This is not a transaction. You are not a customer, and I am not providing you a service to where the customer is always right. Whatever you say, you get to say only because I allow it up until I've had my fill of your stupidity. And the moment I have, I'll mute you.
Make fun of you afterwards.
Like I'm doing now. I mean, Samson literally told you bozos what he wanted to do. He told you idiots, Crawford will have to wait because we want to fight Spence. What you should be asking yourself is, why would Team Fundora want to fight Spence more than Crawford? Crawford beat Spence.
Boxing is not a sport to these people.
It's still a sport to the Brits. It's still a sport to the Asians. It's still a sport to the Aussies and the Mexicans, but not to the idiots in America. No. Now you should go be a blithering idiot by yourself. In fact, why don't you start up a channel, upload these thoughts, and see who gives a damn? Because I don't. We're at a point where these morons are trying to argue what is obvious for no reason other than they want to argue.
Argue with your mother, your landlord.
Even worse is that I go live and post the live link several times throughout the live to argue with these morons, bait them to come on, but they never do. They don't want to do it in real time because they'll know how stupid they sound. No, they hide out in the comments.
I love exposing these idiots in real time, so if you want to argue, you can argue in real time, where I can make you look like a buffoon.
But you want to hide because you're a coward. You think I don't read the stupid comments you leave me? I do. And the moment they become too stupid, you lose your speaking privileges. You don't like it?
Fly a kite.
Touch some grass. Kick a rock. Create a pseudonym. Make a new account so you can leave me more dumb comments. The thing is, it'll take you a lot longer to make that new account than it'll take me to mute it. Like and subscribe. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, it appears that Teofimo Lopez is attempting to sever ties to Top Rank, saying the promotional agreement with Top Rank is invalid.
He's trying to achieve free agency, but to go where?
Once again, he's taking his cues from other fighters, other free agents like Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, the guys he likes to talk down. Teofimo, in a legal letter sent to Top Rank on Thursday, contended his promotional agreement is invalid and that he should be a free agent, sources told ESPN. The 27-year-old Lopez signed a contract extension with Top Rank ahead of his December 2022 win over Sandor Martin, and that's where the dispute lies. The contract language stipulated the extension would kick in after he defeated Jose Pedraza, per sources. Instead, Lopez defeated Martin, who had replaced the injured Pedraza.
So now it all boils down to the legalese and what it actually says, because this is just what they're claiming.
We don't know that it's true, where they're saying Pedraza specifically. In the contract language, it may just say Teofimo's next fight. Ultimately, we don't know. Top Rank responded the amendment was valid, regardless of the late change in opponent, and that Lopez agreed the amendment remained valid in a subsequent written document. Top Rank declined to comment. Lopez, who was ESPN's number 10 pound-for-pound boxer, didn't respond to a text message seeking comment. Top Rank not only argued that its contract with Lopez is valid, but there are multiple fights left on his deal due to several extensions that were triggered separate from the amendment, sources said.
He's rocking the boat because he wants to get away. So the question is, Why does he want to get away? It's because he feels a loss coming. He can see it.
He can sense it. He struggled with Steve Claggett. His supporters don't want to acknowledge that, but he did. You had a guy, he ain't hard to find, he was standing in front of you for all 36 minutes, all 12 rounds, and you couldn't get rid of him. So that after that, Top Rank wanted you to fight Brian Norman, a bigger guy who would have fought the same fight.
Might have
It's
lost.
the real reason he called that fight off. That fight was supposed to go down last month. It didn't because Teofimo claimed, well, they want the fight in New York and he wants it in LA. I didn't believe that.
He senses a loss is coming.
The contract read that if Lopez won another title, there would be an extension. He did so when he upset Josh Taylor to become WBO Junior Welterweight Champion in June of last year. Lopez then claimed he was retired and didn't entertain any fight offers for the rest of the year, like he's doing now. That's more time that could be added onto his contract. The promotion was looking to match Lopez. With former champion Jose Ramirez in December of last year, Lopez returned with a decision victory over Jermaine Ortiz in February instead. Lopez then made a second successful defense with a win over Steve Claggett in June in Miami, a homecoming for the South Floridian.
Oh, I thought he was from Brooklyn. Guy's about as much from Brooklyn as a cowboy hat.
Lopez was slated to fight for a third time in 2024 and was offered a September 27th fight in New York, but he elected not to fight on that date. That's more time that could be added to the contract along with the title victory and the brief retirement. The sides are trying to iron out a resolution, sources said, but there's no agreement yet and no fight scheduled for Lopez.
This could go sideways for Teofimo. Like the whole George Kambosos thing and looking for a little bit more money. It wouldn't be the first time that Teofimo shot himself in the foot trying to be a wise ass.
Reminds me of the whole Mikey Garcia thing a few years ago. Mikey wanted his release from Top Rank. It ended up costing him 2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years, you're not going to get back.
That could happen to Teofimo if this goes sideways. He doesn't seem to want to fight under their banner. He doesn't seem to want to fight any of the fighters, any of the options they're providing him with, but he is still under contract.
So the way it looks, they're holding up their end of the bargain. They are meeting their obligation to you as your promoter, but you're not holding up yours.
Now, he's likely been planning this for a while, looking for a way out, looking for a loophole. He sees that Shakur achieved free agency, but not like this. He saw out the duration, the life of his deal.
So did Devin.
With Matchroom and with Top Rank, whereas you're trying to break the deal, breach the contract.
And why would you do that instead of fighting? Why would you do that instead of making money? It's because you feel a loss is coming. You're trying to get out of Dodge before that happens.
Top Rank can't just release him because it would set a dangerous precedent moving forward to where any fighter who wants to end their contract early start throwing their toys out of the pram, acting like a brat, acting like a prat,
Like Teofimo.
to achieve free agency and get out of honoring the deal they accepted. No, they can't just cut him loose.
It'd be generous of them if they did.
But it would set a bad precedent moving forward. I think if they can, they should make an example out of Teofimo. That if they can jam him up with this for a year, 2, 3 years, they should. To teach him a lesson, and more importantly, to teach the next generation of young fighters a lesson.
Stop trying to be a wise ass. Stop dicking around and do your job. Honor the deal.
You accepted it. You signed it. Not because Teofimo is this invaluable asset to Top Rank, but because he's a pain in the ass and he should suffer for it.
Jesus Christ.
If they can put his balls in a vice, they should.